Okay, welcome to week 2 for the CDC session. This week we're going to focus on a extended front wing or an emerger style wing. Excuse me. And this is the way that you're going to want to tie it when you tie it down on a more of appropriate size, say 18 or 22, somewhere in that range, 24. These flies are typically pretty small. They don't take a lot of material. The way we're going to tie it is like this, which is only subtle differences. You can see that the body on this one is a little bit thicker. The thorax has dubbing, and this one does not have a stem in the wing, or a prominent stem in the wing. We'll kind of cover why that doesn't matter so much. So we're going to tie this on a 12 just because it's easier to demonstrate on and shoot video on. So I'm going to get my hook in the vise. That's a size 12 curved hook. You can tie them on straight shanks. Excuse me. The thread I'm using is 8/0 and iron gray uni. First thing we want to do is pull some extra thread out of this spool, and we want about 5 inches or so. And then we're going to tie on about 2.5 bodkin widths behind the eye, or at the back roughly of where the thorax is going to start. I'm going to swing my thread down underneath, and I'm going to tie it in on the bottom side. Now as we come back, you really want to make sure you have nice touching turns. The underbody on this, especially for the abdomen, is crucial. As smooth as you can get it, the better. Practice your thread control here. If you're not sure what that is, where you open and close your thread. We actually just got done doing a session on that last month called Basics to Build On. The prerequisite video and week 1 really explain how to do that well. So you want to have a nice smooth underbody right here. With this tag, we want to keep it. That's going to be our rib. I've just got a little clip. I know some of you may have a little spring or something. Try to get that out back and out of your way. So the first thing we got to do is we got to put the tail in, and there's actually numerous methods to do this. For the tail, you can use things like Antron. You can use polypropylene. You can use EP fiber. You could use just bucktail fiber, which we're going to get into in a minute. So there's a lot of different things that you can use here. We're going to actually use some lemon barred wood duck. This is a flank feather. You can use mallard flank. So there's actually, you use other kind of soft tackled feathers. So there's a lot of options here. What we want to do, I'm going to try to show 2 methods on the tail. So what we want to do is we want to create a little break point in the stem, and we want to get rid of all of this down below. You can try to save that and use it for something. I don't bother with it. So that you have a feather that looks like this. The main thing here is you've got even points on both sides. It looks like I'm a barb long on my left. I'm going to save that feather for just a second. So another thing you can do is, if you don't or are not familiar with doing it that way, creating a left and right shuck side with a feather, you can actually just take it all off of your stem at a 90-degree angle. I just switched feathers because if I do this with my other feather, it starts to get wonky. and they don't want to perform well. And you can literally tie this in just off the stem. You want the length of the tail to be about the length of the shank. So you can literally just tie it in like this. Or you can remove it from the barb. Or you remove the barbs from the stem. Sorry. I know some new tires prefer this. And I do too to some degree, because you've got something to actually grab here and physically handle and maneuver. We want the concave side facing up. It's not mandatory. I just think it looks a little better for this pattern. If you need to flip it around for some reason, go for it. I'm not sure that it's technically a deal breaker. So you can do it this way. Just trying to give you some options. Or you can remove it from the stem and do it this way. And you still get the same effect. Sometimes people that have larger fingers or not quite as good dexterity prefer one method over another, so I'm just trying to explain the different methods. I'm going to go back to my original feather here. So I've got this here. What I want to do is, and this can be a little bit more challenging, but you're going to need to be able to perform this to get the legs in place somewhat easily and well. And what I want to do is I want to collect my left and right side, and I want to have an even amount just like before. This is probably a little bit much. I'm not sure that I want to go into too much time really nitpicking on how much you have on a left and a right. Plus, I'm not sure you're going to be able to see it. In reality, you're going to have about, on a size 12, 3 to 4 coming off your left, 3 to 4 coming off your right side. And right here, I've got a little bit more than that. And so, but the main thing is you want them even. You're going to pinch the feather like this with your predominant hand. This is my right thumb, right index. My left thumb, left index, I'm going to pinch and pull them together, and I'm going to work my fingers forward so that they start to create more of a split tail. I want them to actually collapse together like this at a point. And then I can pinch there. You want to make sure that you have your distance, whatever that is. If you need to, you can actually wet your fingers and draw them together a little bit for the tie-in purpose of this, so that you have something that looks like this. It just kind of ends up being a little bit of a fork tail. Kind of represents a shuck really nice. So just something to think about. So I'm going to actually just lick these and get them to try to stick together. Hey, cool, I got rid of a couple. That was pretty thick. So I'm going to get my distance. That's a little long. I'm going to pinch them together at the point that I want to tie them in. And I'm just going to tie them in. I'm going to roll them up onto the top of the hook shank. So I'm going to tie them in on the side of the shank and roll them in up top. And then that'll get you a nice open and splayed look. I'm not going to go back and do the other way, but you want to put an extra wrap in here. Okay, and so now we're going to kind of get into the difference between making a thin body and a thick body. If you want to make a thin body and you're tying down on like an 18 to 24 or whatever, you're going to need to do this. It's not going to work very well the other way because you're going to build up too much bulk in the body. So I want to make sure I show this and push you. So I've got bucktail here, dyed olive. Bucktail is a great material for body wrap and emerging patterns. I think it's one of the things that's most underutilized. And we're just going to clip off, I don't know what I got there, a dozen fibers or so. I'm going to pinch the longer ones and hold on to those. I'm going to strip the shorter ones away because I don't need them. On a 18 to 24, you really only need 4 3. I mean, I guess it depends on the size of the hook you're using, maybe 2. You just don't need much. So, I mean, one piece of bucktail will go a long way. But you do need to get rid of everything that's short because it will foul things up. Since we're tying on a 12, I'd say go 4, maybe 5 or 6. The goal here is that you can kind of collect them, grab them together, and they can form like sort of like a little rope. So we don't really need to line these up necessarily. All I've done is flipped it around, and we're going to go kind of off the shortest fiber, which is right in here, and we're going to just tie this in right here at the back. Okay, now I can wrap everything forward, and my tail and my body wrap and my tag are all ready to go. Okay, so if you're challenging yourself and tying these smaller, this is the way you need to do it. I want to back up a little bit and explain how we need to do it for a 12 because it changes just a little bit to make it easier in reality. I know a lot of people are not comfortable doing stuff like this, just leaving feathers hanging off one turn of thread. So what we're going to do is we're going to again come back forward, tying this all in. We want to make sure that we leave the barbs of the tail on top, and you want to try to keep a nice underbody here. We're only going to go back to where we started the thread. I like fingernail clippers here on stuff like this, especially when you get down to the smaller flies. Okay. So, because I shortened all that bucktail so much, I can't see it, and clip some new stuff out here. So again, I'll go through the same process. Pinch, pull. Get rid of all my short stuff. Kind of turn around, play with it. Bucktails typically don't have a ton of underfur. If you got some fibers that are super wonky, get rid of those. Let's see, I've got a whole lot here. This will easily make 2 or 3 flies. So I'm just going to have to kind of eliminate some of this here. And try to get your tips a little even. Sorry, I'm out of camera. And the reason you want to get down so close is because the more of this that's in there when you tie this all in, the thicker the underbody is going to be. So even though it's going to be a little bit thicker, we're going to try to shorten it down a little bit. So again, we want to be able to pull this tight and have something along those lines. We're going to tie this in up front and then work it back. Again, we want this on top. We've got it opposite of where our counter rib is going to start. And after you've put 3 or 4 turns in, enough to where it's reasonably locked into place, you want to kind of collect this. I like to draw this all straight up because there's nothing in my way. Lay it gently down to the back so that it's flat, and now I can start to really put my nice touching turns in. Tightening everything down right along the back of the top of the hook shank. Watch out for that hook point. I just nicked my thread. So when you get down towards the back, I'm not necessarily looking at the body so much. What I am looking at is this point right there where there's thread underbody, tag, tail, bucktail, and my wrapping thread. And what I'm looking for is each turn. I did nick my thread, bummer. Each turn, I'm going to slow down and wait until I notice movement, the slightest movement in my tail. This is actually very critical because otherwise your tail is going to collapse and go down, and we want it to kind of be pointed up and bouncing off the back of the fly a little bit. And so as each thread wrap comes over, now you can see as it's coming over, it's starting to move that tail ever so slightly when I do this. When that happens, angle your thread forward. out to the side, down and around, and you'll notice my tail didn't move that time. And now I can bring my thread forward. Again, you want to try to have nice touching turns. I know it gets a little hard to see with the black thread or close to black thread and background. I struggle with that too. We're going to clip this out. Again, I like fingernail clippers there. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to palmer this material forward. We're going to do the same thing, stretch it up, draw it out. If you want to make this more durable, what you want to do is before you collect all your tail fibers, get your head cement or your super glue ready, and then we'll draw the fibers out. We can glue the top of this and then start to wrap the body forward. I'm not going to do that on this fly just because it's an instructional video. I do recommend it, but once that glue goes down, you've really got to move. And so I'm going to draw these fibers around. Each time I come around, I'm going to pinch close. See if I can pull around to the top. I'm going to pinch close and draw so that it stays flat. I'm going to roll over the shank, pinch close so it stays flat. The more even your tension is, the less likely you are, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to bump the camera. The less likely you are to have overlap or gap. Now you are going to have a little bit of gap in there because it's bucktail. It's a natural fiber. But you just want to kind of keep doing this process. If it starts to pull away from you a little too much, loosen the tension up on the hands and fingers that you're holding the bucktail with. Not too much, but then you can kind of tap with your bodkin everything back into place, or maybe your fingernail too would work here. And so we're going to continue to keep moving forward. Another thing you can do too, just like with floss and other materials, is that you can loosen up on your tension that you're holding the body material with, and you can kind of wiggle it a little bit as you're turning it around to get it to lay flat and nice and tucked into each previous wrap. As you get close, you're going to start to run out of real estate on your bucktail. So as that happens, come around your backside, take your opposing finger, push, let go, grab with one hand, draw and pull forward so that you get the flat side again. If your bucktail is long enough, you won't have this issue. Sometimes your bucktail is going to be a little bit shorter depending on where it comes from on the tail. So I know this part's a little tedious when using bucktail, but it's honestly it's one of the most underutilized materials for doing emerger patterns like this. Not only does it really do a good job mimicking a natural, but I mean it's ridiculously cheap. You can mix and match colors and whatnot. So I'm going to tie this off. I'm going to tie it off on the top side. And the reason I want it on the top side is so I can fold it over, start to work my thread back into the abdomen just a little bit. We want to be, when I let my thread rest, you can see I'm about a bodkin or two, half, something like that, from the point to the thread. But it really locks this down here and creates a nice abdomen. Okay. So since we didn't glue the underbody, we definitely want to glue the rib. And we want the rib to go the opposite direction of the way we wrapped. And I forgot which way there we go. So we want to make sure that this literally crosses over. I know you can't see that very well. I apologize for that. But the reason for having a rib like this on a merger pattern is because the bucktail and everything, not only does it have like these little hollow points in the hair that already makes it want to be more susceptible to floating higher in the water column, but also we use something like this as a rib, just the thread, and it's not, I mean, it's a fraction of the weight. I mean, this is still less weight than your extra small wire. And it'll be just as durable when we do this. We're going to take a little bit of glue. We're going to gently brush it across the top. So you can kind of see these little bubbles right in there. And that's all we want. So as we wrap this forward at roughly a 45-degree angle, that glue is seeping down into the bucktail and really protecting your thread wraps, or your your bucktail wraps. For some reason I always call it thread. I don't know why I do that, but anyway, so we're looking to get 4 to 5 turns out of here. I mean, we want to make sure we protect it well. And then as I come up to my thread, I'm going to pull my actual thread. I'm going to pull my tag straight up, make one wrap around with my thread, and as long as I've got tension on it, my tag is holding. You can put another wrap or two there, fold it over, and then put another wrap or two coming back. That totally locks everything into place, and we've just built the back half of this fly. Again, this is going to be more of a beginner way to do this. The more advanced way would be to actually tie everything in at back. So challenge yourself. Okay, so now it's time for the wing, what we're actually here to do, talk about CDC. If you bought a material kit, or if you've got CDC that comes in a bag from the store, you'll see that there's several different sizes. Let me get this out of the way for just a second. There's several different sizes, and these are lined up. And so this would be more of like a regular, this would be more of an extra select. You really need to go through your feathers and select them wisely here. This extra select, you really need to save for a different fly we're going to do in the coming weeks. And we want something more along like this, a little bit smaller feather, not a puff. I did have a puff here, but they're so light they just blow around. But a puff is basically something like that. But you do want a little bit smaller size feather. And what we want to do is we want to get 3 of them. I'm going to bring my fly back into place here. You want 3 of them. And what we want to do is we want to take them and make it so that the concave sides are facing one another. Now on something like a 16 or an 18, 3 is going to be more than sufficient to float the fly. On a 12 like this, on a little bit heavier hook, we're actually going to need to add some foam. So first I'll demonstrate how to do the CDC thorax. I'll take that off, and then we'll do the foam thorax with dubbing. So we want to line the tips up for our CDC feathers. And what we're looking to do when we line them up is get them about halfway out the back of the tail, something like that. And we're literally just going to take them. You can actually do this if you want to and separate the points. I don't necessarily do that, and I'll show you why. So when you know the distance that you want, you can actually just exceed that by just a fuzz, so that we have a good idea of where that's going to land. And we're going to put just a couple of gentle wraps in. This will allow us to move the feathers up on top, and it looks like a hot mess. That's okay. But since we added some extra to the back, I can grab my stems, I can grab my tips, and then just gently kind of lift and pull. You want to lift, don't drag it. You really got to lift up on your thread and pull just a little bit. And what that does, I got to put some pressure here, hopefully it doesn't move, is it keeps all this in line. If you just drag it, it starts to become a hot mess, and it can really foul things up later. Okay. So at this point, if you're going to do just a smaller size and a CDC thorax. We want to tie all this down. You want to be fairly tight. We still need to save about a bodkin width behind the eye at minimum. So you can see I've got a little bit of room there. And I'm going to take my fingernail clippers and trim this out. Make sure you don't cut your thread. It's super easy to do. And save this. We can use that for other stuff. Okay. Now I'm going to tightly wrap back to where I started my CDC wing. And if you got any little fuzzies that are too long, you want to get rid of those. Okay, so next you're going to want to take a CDC feather, and we want to make a body wrap out of it. And so we're going to tie this in by the tip, just like so. You want to take your feather, kind of pull all of it together as much as possible so that you can see that you've collected everything up front, or as close as you can. You've got a little bunch hanging out right there, and we're going to try to line that up, this little tip. We're going to try to line that up where our thread stopped, about a bodkin width behind the eye. And we can wrap forward. Next, we're going to take the CDC feather and just start to twist. Don't over twist because it'll snap. These are somewhat delicate fibers. You're going to make a wrap or two in. You're going to spin it and twist it again. Uh-oh. And keep some tension on it. And then when you get to your thread, you can tie this off. Again, this is the way you want to do it if you're tying down on a 24 or whatever. That's just kind of how it's predominantly done. And then once you have that, we can actually trim this out. So we'll just pretend like this part's not there, and whatever. So now that we've covered that, we'll go back and add the foam and do the way we're actually tying it on a 12. And so I'm just showing you these things because these patterns are typically just tied smaller, and CDC tends to be more productive, much smaller. Like I said, I know we're tying on a 12. That's just so I can show you these things. So when you feel like you're ready to graduate to smaller size hooks, you've got something you can fall back on. Okay, so to help keep it buoyant, like we've talked about, I've got a little piece of brown 2mm craft foam. It's closed cell foam. When I take it and I put it up next to the under part of the shank, you can see I'm just barely covering the eye there. I want it to cover about half the gap. I've cut a little triangle into the tip. I want to take that tip and line it up only about halfway to where the thread stopped up front. And the reason for that is, as you wrap this down, it wants to push forward and expand. It doesn't like being caught and trapped. And so as we start to wrap this in, it just keeps sliding forward and moving itself more and more forward until you know it, you're right behind the eye. And we don't want that. So there's that. Okay, now we can just wrap back, again tightening it all down. And when you do this, I'm sorry, I should have said this. As you're bringing this forward, don't over wrap forward. Okay. So we should have something at this point, tying on a 12, maybe even a 14 that looks something like this. And that's fairly simple enough. Again, there's so many different techniques that I've seen that I would love to take the time to explain, and I actually tried to do it a couple of times, and the videos ended up being like an hour long, and I just said, let's shorten some of this. So what I'm going to use here is some dubbing, and to kind of create this little, kind of flash point. This is what I'm using here, is a Harris Ice Dub in gray. Again, if you bought a material kit, you're going to have this. You can choose whatever you want here. You could do natural squirrel or whatever. That's totally up to you. Matter of fact, you could actually even tie the same pattern with kind of like a black or dark brown back and then make everything up front orange, and you'd have a nice little representation of a midge. And so how much to use? It's always hard to say because we just don't want much here. I mean, we're only going to be covering this area right here, which my fingernail basically covers. Although my thread's not quite all the way to the back, that's okay. So, but basically, if you can read lettering, if you can read the words through the back of this eye stub that I've taken off, right? I mean, that's plenty, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to twist it on a little bit loosely. I'm going to slide it up. And as I continue to wrap back to where I want it to go, that eye stub is going to catch. And then you can twist more on, although that one fell off. That's okay. If it falls off, you're probably on the right track for the right amount. And so we're going to just gently wrap back, and now we can wrap forward a few turns. You don't want to overdo it. It's super easy to overdo because you've got to have room for your head, your legs, tying off your foam, and everything else. So when I take my bodkin back to it, just to demonstrate, it's literally about a bodkin and a half width. I'm going to lick my fingers, draw it all to the back, and tie that end going to the back, just so that I keep my head clear. Okay, so now to seat the foam. The way I like to do this, I know people do it a little bit differently, is I'll just loosely place the foam over the top. And then I'll take a loose thread wrap and place it over. I can pinch the front of the foam now, and now I can still lift up and down. And why I do that is because now I can adjust my bobbin and lay it right where that dubbing ends and then pull down. And now I've seated my foam, and I've still got a bodkin width behind the eye. I've just found this over the years to be a very simple way to seat of not only foam but a lot of material. And now we've seated that. Well, again, I'm going to take my fingernail clippers because I can just get close. Here is a place I recommend using some kind of glue. Just put a little on your thread and wrap it over the foam. Ooh. If you have a problem with your thread coming down into the eye, don't be afraid to, at this point, just adjust your fly kind of like this so that it's not coming down into the eye. It can really help. Okay, so now that I've got that, I'm going to kind of jump my thread to the front side of the foam and start to lock it down. And the reason being is because I want to make sure I leave the gap behind my eye. I know I'm kind of hammering away on that one, camping out on the topic, but it's true. It can really foul you up. Okay, and you can even see that the foam started coming down into the eye right there a little bit. Okay, so next for our wing case, we just want to collect them all your CDC, and make sure that they're relatively on top of one another, like so. We're going to bring it just directly over the foam. I would tell you to lick your fingers here, but it doesn't really work with CDC very well. That's the idea behind using CDC. So you want to collect them tight. Again, one loop over, and I can literally take my thread and seat that right where I want it, just like so. And then once I have that, I'll put a couple more wraps in on the back. I'm going to lift everything up. I'm going to put a couple of wraps in directly underneath. You see I'm angling my thread kind of to the back, right up front. And the reason for that is so that the wing actually pops up and not comes down. I'm going to move my thread to the back of the wing. We've got all this crazy stuff going on out back. Now, a lot of people will just leave this and call this their legs, and that's fine. You can do that. If you want to challenge yourself a little bit more, what you need to do is trim all this stuff out. because we don't want that. It's going to impede what we're trying to do. And that's add an actual barred tail, or barred legs, or feather legs coming out the front. And so again, this is just kind of option stuff. So you want to have something that looks about like that. And we're going to go back to the same method we used for putting in the tail. And that's where we fold our legs like this. And now what we can do is we can actually, you can come in from both ways. You can come in from, excuse me, you can come in from underneath. You can come in from over the top. It really depends on what's more comfortable to you. The goal is that your legs, when they've collapsed together and you've tied them in, they reach right into the throat towards the back of the bend, or just slightly past coming into the tail. You've got a little bit of range. You don't necessarily want them short here because betas have long legs. And if you find that when you're on the water and you're getting action, but you're not getting hits, or serious activity, maybe I should say, you always have the option of just coming in and taking your fingers and plucking either the tail down or the legs down, so you can actually groom this on the water, and see if that helps. Maybe that's what they're wanting that day. So I actually go both ways when it comes to putting these underneath. It really just kind of depends for me on how the wing's sitting, because sometimes it doesn't quite sit the same. So I'm going to get this just past the bend. I'm going to pinch tight on the side. I'm going to do 2 loose wraps over and stop so that you can adjust. Before you lift your fingers, do what I just did and move that feather back to the front. There you go. And now it's right underneath, right to the side where it should be. If you let go and then move the feather, they will really twist on you a lot of the time, and you'll find yourself being a little frustrated. If that's working for you and it looks good to you, go ahead and pinch those legs again. Make another 2 tight turns or so. You want to be real careful here. We want to get this feather out from underneath the eye, so just move it to the back, lift everything to the back so we expose the eye itself. And now we're going to build the head. Once you've done that, you can kind of choose when to trim out the legs or the front feather. A lot of times I'll just do it right now, and then I've got something sticking out. Can't quite get to that with my fingernail clippers. But if not, it still affords you a chance to tie it in or glue it down. And so normally I can get it pretty good, but as always, I'm not trying to make an excuse, but with cameras and lights in my way, it shortens my dexterity and what I can do and what I'm comfortable doing on a regular basis. So at this point, we can just whip finish. You want to be careful using glue up front here. I would suggest just using a good 5 or 6 turn whip finish and calling it gravy. If you use too much glue and it leaches into the CDC, the stuff really locks up and you've kind of defeated the purpose of using it. So let's talk about trimming the wing. You want the wing to be about the length of the actual body, so from the head to where the green stops at the back. And this is where these curved scissors come into play. So you can kind of fold this over and get a distance. The more you play with this stuff, you'll kind of get a feel for it. But so if you fold it over to the back, you can say, okay, I've got about that much I need to trim off and shape. So as you pull it forward, you're going to go to your least predominant hand. You want to kind of collapse those all together. And now we can just trim that out with the curved scissors. And you literally just lay these right on top of the curvature of your fingers when you're pinching them together. And you can cut it. I want to scoot forward just a fuzz. You can also do the same thing with straight cut scissors and just kind of gently work around. And it pretty much does the same thing like that. I just I just think with the curved scissors, you know, you get nice and flat, and it's one cut and done. So that's it. That's how you tie CDC or merger, blue wing olive beta style. You could probably do other merger patterns this way. I know it's a little bit long of a video. Sorry, I actually did shoot this 3 times to try to get it shortened down and capture all the main points. I guess one thing I can say is when we use this foam here, is to save extra CDC. The amount of CDC we would need to adequately keep this fly on top of the water on a size 12 curved hook like this, you know, you're probably looking at, I don't know, 6 feathers probably, at least twice the amount. And so you just kind of blow through CDC unnecessarily when foam is a great option to just jump in there and handle some of the load. On the smaller sizes, with all the weight and everything, these things will float all the day long with 2 or 3 feathers. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to bump the camera. So there you go. Take it out, go fishing. You can tie it in other colors. This is really more of a beta style pattern as far as the color scheme is concerned. However, with the way that the wing is structured out front and whatnot, this should give you a fairly good idea of how to tackle this kind of wing going forward. And then the rest of it was just kind of some extra fun. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something, and hope your patterns turn out well, and I really hope you hit a home run on a couple fish with this. So as always, appreciate you watching. Thanks for joining us for week 2 of the CDC session. Obviously week 3 is coming up, and can't wait to see you then. And as always, everybody, happy tying, take care, and we'll see you next time.